Hey guys, Space Marine 658 here. Today we're going to be truly starting on our quest system. Last time we left off, we did some very basic setup. So let's go ahead and actually just jump right into it. So to start setting up our quest system, we're going to need a couple things. We're going to need inst, we're going to need a game mode, and we're going to need the actual quest struct. So let's start with the quest struct because that's going to be one of the most key things to this. So what you're going to do is go right click. I've created a folder, as you can see here, just for our quest system, but you can put this wherever you like. And then what we're going to want to do is go to blueprint, and then under blueprint you're going to see something called structure. Now what structures are they are user defined data. Basically a structure is just a container for data, and you can do anything you want with it, but just understand that in doing it, you need to maintain that. So if you make changes to the struct, that can have long-reaching implications depending on how nested you have data. So just be aware of that. You want to try and have structs, in my opinion, as fleshed out as you can from the get-go, just so you don't have too much editing and messing with it later on. Because while you can do that, it can cause some issues where you need to go in and refresh all the nodes that are connected to it. So let's go ahead and we're going to create a struct. I like to keep with the Unreal Engine or the Epic naming convention. So that's going to be S underscore. And we're just going to call this quest. So this is a singular quest. Now if we go ahead and open up it, you'll see here we're given a default Boolean, but we're not too worried about that. Let's go ahead and there's some things we're going to want for a quest, right? We're going to want a name, because every quest is going to have some kind of name that's a human readable name. We're also going to have maybe a description. This could be something that you show in a quest log. This could be something that, if you want, you could show it a couple different ways. Just depends on what you want to do with it. For my example, I'm going to use this to kind of give a blurb of text for players. Now what we're going to have is next is going to be something called tags. Now, something cool with this system that we're going to set up here in just a moment is a tagging system, so that way you can allow players to have a few different options when it comes to filtering and searching things. For example, we could tag quests that are new and have a separate section for new quests that maybe those get removed once they're made active or something like that. That way you can kind of give some more options when it comes to filtering. We can also use that to create filter groups. So if a player is searching for something, you could actually, instead of filtering on like a name or description, you could actually filter on these tags. So if they're looking for any quests that involve missiles, as an example, you could filter by the tags and look for any quests that have a missile tag. And what we're doing here is we're setting these to text. Now the reason why I like to set them to texts is one, most UI uses text. So if you go in anywhere and you set text, like it says in the title, you're setting the text. In theory, you don't have to. You could use strings and stuff, but then you're converting. If you do it in text, it's localizable. So if you in the future decide you want to convert your game to handle multiple languages, it's much easier to do if you from the get-go set everything as text versus going in and finding out, okay, what is actually a string that you're using in the back end and what's a text that you're using in the front end. Now for the tags, since that's going to be that special gameplay tags, what you're going to want to search is gameplay tag. Now we're going to have multiple, so you have a few options here. You can either have a gameplay tag or a gameplay container. Now this one we're going to have multiple, so we're going to use a container, but here in just a second we're going to actually have some that are going to just be individual. So the tags are one way we can filter. And then we're going to also want, for this quest, we're just going to want to have its own individual tag that is an identifier tag. So we're going to call this the UUID tag is what I like to call it. What this will do is this will allow us to have a tag anywhere in the game that we can use to actually trigger this quest or to find information about this quest. By having this individual tag, we can go, hey, find me the quest that has this tag. Now what we're going to want to do, let me save that, is we're going to also want to make sure that we've got a few things here. So you can give it metadata, you can give it images and things like that. So we will go ahead and do a, we're going to do a texture 2D. Now you could do an array or something like that. I just am going to do a texture 2D. And we'll just call this image because that'll be our metadata for this. So let's say we got tags, we got UUIDs, we got images, and that covers most of what you need. There are a few different things we can add here after the fact. So one thing you might want to do, for example, is have blocking tags. So if we go ahead and say like, we'll call this required quests. And then we can also do something like linked quests. Now we can make these optional, but what they will do is if you want, you can have gameplay tags, or in this example, gameplay tag containers. And what this will do is we're going to set these up so that if you have a required quests, basically what will happen is before this quest can be triggered or started, other quests will need to be done. And so what will happen is these link quests are going to be the ones that actually trigger the required quest to check. So what will happen is you'll complete a quest. So let's say we complete quest 1, right? And it's linked to quest 2. But let's say quest 2 has a required quests of quest 1 and quest 3. What will happen is even though you completed 1, and now that means that that is done, you also still need 3. So it'll trigger, it'll check, and it'll go, oh, nope, you still need 1 more. Then you complete 3, it'll go look, and they'll go, oh, yep, you completed both, therefore we'll give you this quest. And we'll walk through setting that all up. So it sounds a little complicated right now, but we'll walk through all of that in a little bit. All right. So let's see here. So we have required quests, we have linked quests. We can also have statuses. I like to have a status for our quest system. So status. This could be an enum. But personally, I think it's more flexible if we have a gameplay tag container, because then if we want to add additional statuses in the future, you can do so. So for example, if you want to have not started quests versus started quests versus active quests, that way you can have a variety of different ways to tag them. You ever played Skyrim, they'll give you a few different sections of quests, completed quests, things like that. So we'll just have a general status location. In fact, I'm going to move this up to probably not at the top, but I'll say it should be pretty high up there. And then we'll move tags back down and the UUID tag down. That way, the goal here, actually, I'm going to move that up. So we want to keep all this metadata together, and then we'll keep the tags all together. All right, so this is a singular quest, as you can see here. So we've got a name, description, an image for this quest, status, UID, tags, and then required quests and link quests. And I'm going to actually change, now that I'm thinking about it, this shouldn't be a container. We're going to change the status to just be a gameplay tag, because you only want one status at a time. All right, so now we have a structure created. Now we have to store this somewhere, right? So we're going to go ahead and edit the instance. So there should be an instance that already comes with your setup. But if, as an example here, you're not sure where it's at, what you can do is up here at the top, you've got a world override. So how this works is you've got project settings and world override. You may want to have it where you've got multiple levels with different either game modes or instances in different levels, depending on what your setup is. Personally, I like to make sure that they're the same across the board unless I'm going to actual different game modes. For example, I'll usually have a menu game mode that handles just sort of the general UI when you first load into the game. And then I'll have a game mode for single player, game mode for multiplayer, and then other kind of weird options like co-op or things like that. But yeah, so then to see your instance, you just go ahead and hit edit the game mode. So example here, I've got BP first person game mode. And inside of here, you've got a lot of different options. So you got player states, you've got HUD. Most of this we don't really need to worry about right now, except for maybe the player controller. That might be useful to know where that's at and to be used. But as you can see here, we don't have an instance. And that is because we need to actually go ahead and create one. So we'll go ahead and right click, and then we're going to go up to Blueprint Class, and then we're going to go to All Classes, and then you're going to type in Instance. And I should probably add before that, you're going to want to have Game Instance. And then go ahead and select. And now what we're going to do is, since this is a game instance, we're going to give it GI underscore player instance. It's a game instance, so what would be more accurate is just game instance. So it'll be GI game instance. What I like to do is just call it the name of the game, so it'd be like GI underscore name of game. But for now, we'll just leave it like this. All right, but there's a few different ways you can do this. If you go up to your project settings, you hit all settings and then just search game instance. You'll find the actual default game instance, which you could go search for and find, but I like having a blank template to kind of start with. So we'll go ahead and go in here and we're going to select our GI game instance. Go ahead and close that. Now if we go ahead and open up our game instance, we're going to eventually get around to saving and loading quests. But for now, we're not going to worry about that too much. Our game instance is just going to store some information about what the base level quest system looks like. Saving and loading we'll worry about at another time. So what we're going to go ahead and do is under the variables, we're going to create just a, you can split this up if you'd like. And that's how I'm going to do it here. But we're going to have a quest underscore level 1. And what you basically want to do is for each level or for each grouping of quests, I like to split them up like this, and you can make them an array like that. Now, depending on how your game is set up, there's a few different ways you can do this. If, for example, you're doing more of an open world game, you're not going to have distinct levels, so what instead you can do is group quests into maybe locations. So, all quests in, using some Skyrim terminology like Markarth, all quests in Winterhold, things like that. Grouping them in a way that makes sense for you as the game designer. Because the goal here is we're creating a quest system that is flexible enough that even if you don't know that much programming, once it's set up, you can use pretty efficiently to add additional quests and to change how the quests interact. So let's go ahead and we're just going to create a couple of default quests here to just kind of get some data sitting in here. And we'll just call this quest 1. Go description of this is the first quest. And then we're going to just plug in a blank image here. We're going to not give it any kind of status, because by default you can just have a status of none, and that'll be our sort of pending quest. One thing we would want to do though is open up our project settings, because we're going to probably add some gameplay tags here in a second. In fact, while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and add a couple here. So we're going to hit manage gameplay tags. We're going to hit quest, and now you can see we have these statuses of act complete or failed. What we're going to do is we're going to click on quest, hit the plus, so we have quest dot, and we're going to actually do the same structure we have here where we're keeping the array, and we're going to call this level 1, and that'll give us a level 1 tag. Now what we're going to want to do is have a tag here, or a UUID tag for this specific quest. So this quest 1. So this is level 1, quest 1. We're going to add this tag. And then what we can do is we can come over here and under status, we can go quest, level 1, quest 1. And this means that if we're ever searching for a quest, we can do a for loop over, whatever grouping of quests we're looking through and search for one that has, I put it in the status, whoops. Wherever we're looking for, these quests, we can just go through the UID tag, and we know that that's only going to have one tag, and we're going to be looking for the matching tag. The cool thing is, because it's very flexible, if you need to change quests around, let's say you realize, oh crap, I put these quests in the wrong order, you can switch them around, and it should be relatively easy to just swap them. So let's go ahead, and we're actually going to give ourselves a second quest here down below. Call this quest 2. And this is going to have descriptions of this is the second quest. And we'll also give it a placeholder image, no status. We're going to create a quest 2. And what I'm going to show you here in a moment is we are going to add on to our struct by adding an objective system. But before we do that, let's go ahead and finish up what we're working on. All right. For now, I'm not too worried about these tags, required quests. Or I guess we'll say, required quest is, let me go here. For quest 2, we require, quest 1 from level 1. The cool thing is, because this is built around tags, that means you can link any quests to be required, any other quests. The only real limitation here is your own memory for remembering which quests are linked to what. Now, as far as these link quests, what we'll want to do is we'll make sure that quest 2 here, since it is requiring quest 1, if we do this link quest, that means we can fire an event here. So when this quest becomes active, once it's completed, we can fire off an event saying this tag is ready to be, made active, if we so choose. If you don't put link quest here, you can make it so that way it's not required. That way it won't auto start quest 2. Just depends on how you have it set up once we get to that point. So let's go ahead and go back to our quest system here. Now we're going to want to create some more tags, of course. So as you can see here, we have a gameplay tag. We want to switch it back to a gameplay tag container. And what we're going to do is call this objectives. And we shall also create an objective. So let's go back to our gameplay tags here, manage this quest. We're going to create another level. So quest.objectives. Now with this one, what I would suggest is for any generic objectives, things that players may do multiple times. So for example, kill 100 creatures. What you're going to want to do is have a generic folder that's going to store, or I say folder, a generic part of your gameplay tag manager that is just going to store those kind of objectives that are not necessarily quest specific. But then you also want to break it down in the objectives thing by level. So for example, on level 1, if you know that this objective is it's a specific thing, talk to, bad guy number 1, and that is a required tag, but that's only going to be a required tag for that objective for that one level. You want to store it in that way you can kind of keep things kind of neat. But for now, since we're doing a generic one, we'll call this pickup weapon. That'll be this objective. In theory, this is a little bit more specific because it's the initial game pickup weapon, but we'll worry about that later. And then what we're going to want to do is go ahead and go into here. So now that we've got our objectives set up, right? So we can take any kind of gameplay tags we want here, make them objectives. What we'll do is in our instance, we're going to say the objectives for here is going to be picking up a weapon. And so now at this point, it's on you as a designer to figure out, how do I want my player to get this tag? Well, to do that, we need to have a gameplay tag somewhere on our player. So we're going to create a component here in a moment. But also, how do we get the tag into that component, right? Well, as an example here on the first person template, we've got this pickup weapon where you walk up to it and you pick up the weapon. So what we're going to do once we have that component on the player, I'm going to show you how we're going to actually add that tag to the player. So let's go ahead and grab our first person blueprint for our player character. And we're going to create a new component. So it's going to be a new blueprint script component. In theory, you can do it in C++. If you know enough of C++ to follow along, definitely do that. It's a little bit better. But with 5.5, they've added something that allows you to tick all components of a similar actor together, which is really going to be handy for us blueprint folk, or blueprint main folk. So this is going to be an actor component. And I'm going to call this our... this doesn't have to be specific to a quest. In theory, you can have a gameplay tag that is just in general a container for gameplay. Great. gameplay tag containers. So that's what I'm going to call it here. So this is just going to be our gameplay tag. I won't call it component, but we'll just say it's an active component. So AC underscore gameplay tag tags, gameplay tags. And we'll just create this under the first person folder. Now, inside of here, we're going to have a few different things we're going to need to do. We can go ahead and remove these. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have a gameplay tag container. And this is going to be our current tags. And this is just going to store every tag that is on the player at this moment. And then we're going to have some functions. These are going to be our public facing functions. So it's going to be add tag and remove tag. There are some layers of complexity you can do where you can have stacks of tags and things like that. I don't think we necessarily need that for this because we're going to keep it relatively simple, but just be aware that you can do so. And on our inputs for the add tag, we're just going to ask for a gameplay tag. And we're just going to call this tag to add. And then on the remove, we're basically going to do the exact same thing. And then it's going to be remove tag, tag to remove, so tag to remove. And what we're going to want to do is anytime you add or remove a tag, you want to call an event dispatcher to update anyone listening to the player's tag system or is listening for a specific tag. Now, there are a couple ways to do this depending on how you want to do it. So what I like to do is we're going to have a tag, tag listener. And to actually have this have any kind of meaningful data, what we're going to want to do is do a, we're going to have a signature. So what we need to do to create a signature is bring it into here, and I believe if it is on assign, and then we'll call this signature. Now, what we need to ask ourselves is, okay, what information do we need when a tag is added or removed, right? Well, there's a few different ways you can pass information to the different things needing to listen. What I would say is you could wrap it in struct, but we're only going to have really two pieces of information. So we're not going to worry about wrapping it in struct. What we're going to have is we're going to have a gameplay tag, and this is going to be tag changed. And then we're going to have a container. So it's going to be a gameplay tag container. And this is going to be current tags. And so what's going to happen is what we're doing here with this signature, this is basically setting it up so that, oh, I misspelled tag there. What this is going to do is when we go to have these events get dispatched by the add or remove tag, it's going to pass that information on to whatever is receiving this information. So if you've binded a UI element, as an example, to listen for tag 1, when that tag gets added, it's going to say, hey, everything listening for tag 1, here is, an event saying this tag has been added, and here you go. And it's basically going to pass information needed. I'll go ahead and compile, and I need to actually delete this and pull out a custom event again, and we'll call signature again. All right, there we go. And the cool thing is if we just set the signature, any new event dispatchers can just copy and paste this setup as needed. All right. So let's go ahead and so we've added our tag and removed our tag. So the way we actually need to do the adding or removing is we're going to grab our current tags. So for adding, we're just going to go in and say add gameplay tag. Relatively straightforward, and then tag to add. All right, and now how we're going to actually notify whoever's listening for a change is we're going to actually create a function here. We're going to call this notify tag change. Now this one is going to be a bit of a big blueprint by the time you are done. Unfortunately, I have done my best to try to make this as simple as possible in this section, but essentially, it can get quite complex. Let me explain what I'm saying here in a second. So to notify whoever's listening about the specific gameplay tag that's changed, they're usually going to be bound to a specific tag to be listening for. And so the way we're going to want to do that is have an event dispatcher for each different tag. Now this can get quite crazy, but there are a few different ways you can do it differently. I like to have an event dispatcher for each tag because, let me show you my other project as an example. The benefit of having these being separate tags is that when I fire off a event, I know that only the people who are subscribed to that event will listen for it. If you have it condensed down to like 1 or 2 events, what'll end up happening is that you'll have a lot of things listen to it, think and try to figure out if they should do something, and then that just eats up a lot of computational time, versus this requires a little bit more effort on your end on the initial setup, but it's a lot more flexible when it comes to making sure that the correct things are getting notified. So the way this is going to work is you're going to have the add tag, and then we're going to call notify tag change. And we're going to pass in our tag that is changing. And what's going to happen here is we're going to call the event. So let's go ahead and we're going to remove the default because we're only going to have this trigger on anytime we have a gameplay tag get updated. So we're going to have objective pickup weapon. And I think for now, let's see here. We're also going to have one for quest 2. We'll start with objective pickup weapon, and then we'll also have for, what did we have that set up as? So the completed or the UUID tag is going to be this quest 1. So what we're going to want to listen for is going to be these linked quests. So when we have this trigger, we're getting this tag updated. That's because we're starting off with the default here. Now, that's not necessarily the way you have to do it. It's all entirely up to you how you want to set that part up. But for me, this is the one that makes the most sense. So what we're going to do is I'm going to actually do one for each. So we're going to quest 1 and quest 2. So, because what we can do now that we're going to have these is we can trigger. So if the quest gets added to the player's gameplay tag container, we can trigger off a HUD element to show the quest has been made active. So you'd want to do this for each and every single quest, each and every single objective. Just depends on how detailed you want to be and how much you want to show the player in terms of the UI. So as you can see here, we have these different options. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple event dispatchers. So we're going to have a pick up weapon dispatcher. This is going to copy that signature from earlier. And then we're going to have a quest 1 dispatcher and a quest 2. And you can name these anything you want, whatever helps you keep them straight in your head. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to call these. So, we've done our change. We've made our big add here. So then we want to go, okay, here is the tag that is changed. And then we're going to also want our current tags here. And this just helps so that way sometimes you're going to want to have to do different things depending on the tags the player currently has. So for example, if the tag is changed, easiest thing you can do is just say, does current tags have tag changed? Because then that basically tells you if either yes, it has that tag, or no, the tag was removed. And then you can do different things depending on that. Now let's go ahead and call quest 1 and quest 2. And these are going to be called like this and like this. And basically you can just plug in current tags as well. But as you can see, this can get kind of ugly, especially if you have a lot of different things going on. And I haven't found a good workaround other than just splitting it up. You could probably have a few different sections holding like different groups of tags. But for now, this will work for what we need it. All right. So this is going to call all of these. We've got our add tag, notifying a tag change. Now, what we want to do for our remove tag is basically just do the opposite. So we will want notify tag change, but we're going to want to grab our current tags and we'll go remove gameplay tag. And we're going to want to remove this. Now, this does return if it was successful or not. That is useful for where they might be able to turn in a quest multiple times. So if for some reason you don't have error checking on the actual interact, you could have it here as well. Just say, hey, was this successful? If it was successful, fire off notify tag change. If not, don't fire it off. We won't worry about that here. We're just going to then notify the tag that is being removed, and that will update. All right. So that is the actual adding of tags and notifying of the change. Now the question is, how do you listen for those events? So what we're going to want to do is we're going to do something called add listener. And what this is going to do is we're going to be passing an event from wherever the listener is into a binding for that specific thing. So for example here, we're going to pick up weapon and we're going to call bind. So bind event to pick up weapon. Now what we want to do is we want to pass this event back through here. Now this part right here is why it's so important for that signature to match across all the event dispatchers, because if they don't, you can't have one singular function for this. You'll have to have a listener for every single style of signature that you have. Now, for the most part, I recommend that they be exactly the same unless you have a really, really specific reason why you need to be different, in which case you'll just copy paste this add tag listener and just call it whatever reason you're giving that one. So like add enemy tag listener or something like that, if it needs to be different because of the enemy. That would be my suggestion, at least. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a bound event for each and every single one of these. And all right, so what you want to do is you want to go ahead and copy over your switch, and then for your tag listener, you're also going to want to have the tag be passed in as well. I missed that there at the beginning. This will be your gameplay tag to listen for. And you'll go ahead and then just mark these through here. And then you'll want to just drag back these. So what will happen is you're going to want to add a tag listener, and you're going to pass in the tag you're listening for. It's going to switch. And so based on which one you're wanting to listen to, it'll make sure to bind your event to that specific one. All right. You can also do the opposite. It's not as important because it's pretty smart about, doing things in a pretty reasonable way, but you can just go ahead and do remove listener. So this might be something very useful for once a quest is completed. You don't want to be listening to any more of those objectives until, let's say you got some generic ones that you want to re-add to listen to. So for now, we will create a remove. So what you want to do to actually Remove a listener is going to be drag this out and do unbind. Now in theory you could do unbind all, but we of course don't want to do that if you're only unbinding a single event. Unbind, but unbind all is very useful for times when you need to guarantee that a multitude of things are no longer notifying of updates. So for example, if you have switched players and you wanted to unbind everything from the old player, that could be a way to do it depending on how you have your stuff set up. All right. So I give us the ability to remove the listener, add the listener, notify tag change, remove tag, and add tag. Now, the cool part. Let's go ahead and actually set this up on our player. So we're going to go back to our player. So we have our gameplay tags, right? So what we're going to want to do is I'm going to go ahead and go on begin play. We're going to have an event. So let's do, let's actually just grab our, here it is. Grab this and do add listener. And so we're going to listen for that pick up, here it is, pick up weapon. And we're going to call off create event. What this allows us to do, this create event, this allows us to basically clean up our blueprints a little bit. Because in theory, you could just drag this off and do a custom event here. And that would work. And so you can see here, you'll get that data once it triggers here. But that can be a little ugly, especially if you have a lot of different things binded here. So what we can do is we can do create a matching function or create a matching event. If we do event, we can then come in here and go weapon picked up. And let's go ahead and let's do this. And now that we have this kind of contained, you can actually just select it all and collapse to a function. And we'll just call this set up listeners. You can call it whatever you like, but that's just what I'll call it for now. Set up listeners. And now the cool thing is all of our listeners can be contained within a single function. So even if you have 100 listeners listening, which you shouldn't, you should only ever add listeners as needed. But if you did, you could have it all in one function. Now what we'll do for this weapon picked up, we're going to want to first check is has tag, and our tag container is current tags, and we'll do an exact match. And what we'll do is branch. So what this is going to do is we've received the event, right? We've picked up the weapon, we've received the event. We're going to check, did we actually pick up the weapon or did we put it down? Did we remove that tag? If we have picked it up, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to actually do something kind of cool. We're going to grab this and we're going to add tag, remove listener. There we go. So we're going to say, am I passing that back in? Sorry. I should correct myself here. So for the remove listener, you can, I'm trying to remember, you can have a specific, event that triggers on unbinding. I don't believe by default though that it is required. Let me go ahead and what we're going to do is we're going to say just pick up weapon. So we're going to move the listener for this pickup weapon. And we'll just add a custom event here just to make sure it's actually firing. We'll say remove listener. You can just print off here and we'll just say weapon listener removed. Now what we'll want to do is we'll also come up here and we're going to move this over just to make sure we are getting to this point, just in case that remove listener doesn't trigger or something's wrong there. We'll also have something here for weapon picked up. All right, so we're almost there. We're almost to the point where we can start triggering things with this. So as you can see here, so we have the listener, right? So we're listening for the pickup weapon. How do we add this to our player? How do we give them the tag when you've picked up the weapon? Well, if we go in this weapon, right, it goes through all these different setups, checks if things can happen, but at the end of it, it destroys this actor. Well, before we destroy this actor, why don't we give ourselves that tag? So what you can do is you can do, now, if you're doing a multiplayer game, you will have to do this slightly differently. But for our single player folks, you're going to want to do get player pawn. Now you want to make sure, since we're adding it to the player pawn, that you're getting the player pawn. Now, if you are doing a multiplayer game, you're going to have a player index. So I hope if you're following this tutorial and you're doing multiplayer that you understand how the network replication works, but you'll have to get the specific player index for that player. Now, that also depends on how you're doing the quests. If you're just only doing it on the host and you're replicating it to the other players, you can probably do it the same way then. But if you're doing it where maybe like they're individually having their own quests or things like that, you want to make sure you set this up correctly to actually give the if the weapon pickup is picked up, giving the tag to the correct player. Sorry for the tangent. But all right, so we're going to get the player pawn, and then what we want to do is we want to get component by class. So you can basically get a component by class, and the cool thing is this allows us to go in and grab our AC gameplay tags, and then we can call directly to it, add tag. And now we can tell it what tag we want to add. And we'll say we're going to add our pickup weapon. And so what this is going to do is when the player walks over, they grab that weapon, they're going to get the tag pickup weapon, and then it's going to come over here. And since we have that listener, it's going to say, hey, we just added that tag. Yes, it looks like we have that tag. Therefore, weapon picked up. Hey, let's go ahead and remove that listener. Here's what happened when we removed that listener. And then weapon listener removed. Now, this is for a single objective. We're going to go in more detail about quests and how you can set those up. But this is just to kind of show how the notification system is going to work. So let's go ahead, and if I have set this all up correctly, got to give it a second to clean up. And let's go ahead and grab. There we go. As you can see there, the weapon is picked up. Now, it looks like, let me duplicate this. It looks like it doesn't give us that message about the unbinding, which, as you can see here, we can't grab this one because we are, they don't allow it in here, but I wonder if I can just do it anyways. If I just bypass this character has weapon part. Wonder what happens if we just skip that. Yeah, so you can see here we're triggering it every time, which means we're not actually removing the listener. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and see what's going on here. All right, so I kind of figured it out. I was misunderstanding just a little bit. So this does work. What you need to do is in your, where you're actually telling it to remove the listener, you just need that event to be plugged into the actual event that is being triggered by that listener. What it'll do is it'll go to this event and tell it, hey, you're no longer subscribed to that dispatcher. So I was a little mistaken here, but what we'll do is we'll just add this afterwards. But yeah, as you can see, I don't use remove listener a whole lot in my own project, mostly because there is a lot of listeners that I want to have going constantly for UI, because I'm like health updating and things, so not actually unbinding anything in my current project. But yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look now that I've got that working correctly. So what will happen is on the first gun pickup, you can see here, we picked up the weapon, the listener was removed, so we come over here, we don't get that same pop-up. But yeah, so that is how we set up that initial one-shot. So I'm going to call it here. The episode's starting to get a little long, but this is how we basically complete an objective. So now that we have this set up, next episode we're going to go over, once this objective has been completed, how do we trigger to the quest to tell it, hey, your objective was completed. Go ahead and check and see if you have any more objectives. If not, move on. Now, some of that's going to require, we're going to basically set up not a save system, but sort of a save system, sort of a temporary stand-in. So that way, when we remove these, it's not, what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove the objective. But instead of just outright removing it, we're going to do a little bit of tweaking so that way it knows which objectives are completed versus not completed. So if you have any questions, definitely leave them down below. But otherwise, good luck and good hunting.